computer. So welcome everybody. This is the next in the training of the joint RPA, Rabbinic Pastor Association and Ohala. And we have the illustrious Rabbi Ann Brener who will be talking to us today. So take it away, Ann.
Oh, my dears, good morning. Well, at least it's still morning here where some of you are, it isn't. But I'm really, really happy to be here. What a time. What a time when we initially thought about this, it was a whole different time. So I want to talk a little bit about the times and then also about how our rituals, I think, speak to the times. So I'm gonna just let me get so I can look at my, what I'm gonna just say, I think, the people I feel the sorriest for are among the people that I feel the sorriest for now. Of course, there's many, but the Jews who don't know what it means to be a Jew. I get through people, I mean, I've spent, many, many hours in tears in the last few months. But I know what Judaism stands for. And I know the values embedded in our rituals and in our practices. And it sustains me. It sustains me when people attack Jews, when there's an uprising of anti-Semitism. I know what it means to be a Jew. And there are so many people who don't, who are Jewish. And so they must feel so much more unmoored. I certainly feel like, like the earth has pivoted in the last months, but I know where I stand. There is a politician who I think we all probably all know and love, who is Jewish. And he was once interviewed about being a Jew. And what he talked about was he referenced the Holocaust and the suffering of our people. And I just was sick because I wanted to say, don't you know about the Shema and its lessons about oneness and interconnectivity and mutual responsibility, about democracy, about our responsibility to be witnesses? Don't you know that we gave the world this concept, this revolutionary concept that people didn't have to be slaves? Do you know how many times the Torah teaches us to care for and identify with strangers or feed the hungry? Um, our attitudes toward accompanying the dead to the grave and comforting mourners, which force us not just to care for others, but to confront our own mortality and really think about what it means to be a mortal being. Those things really, I could go on and on. I could even give you my theories of why we're good with economics, which are grounded not in anything having to do with avarice. But anyway, I could go on and on. But knowing those things and knowing how those things are embedded, how those teachings are embedded in our liturgy and our practices really ground me and make me a lot less afraid. As a kid, when we would read about the martyrs, I would always think, why? Why would they do that? And now I don't know that, who knows when one is pushed to the edge of their lives, how one would behave. So I won't claim to know how I would. But I understand that those things are really, really worth dying for and certainly worth living for. And I think that a lot of those things are embedded in our mourning rituals. And so I want to go over some of the roots of them. I thought I might change the title from, let's see, what was it? The Mourner's Path, Ancient Wisdom for Today's Heartache, to also be Midrash on Mourning, because I want to just give you some of my sort of. I know I had the pleasure of being at a dinner the other night with Roger Kamenetz and Donnie Massang. I don't know, I suspect both of you, most of you know, are familiar with both of these people. And one of the things that we talked about, um, now I lost my train of thought about what, I guess I'm just sort of reveling in how wonderful it was to be with them. But the fact that Jews don't, that we keep our wisdom to ourselves, that we don't, the idea, they were talking about how we don't proselytize, but in the process of not proselytizing, we don't reveal, we don't reveal how central these teachings are and what they mean and what they can offer the world. So I want to go back. Let me share my screen. Da, 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 da. No. Oh dear, I'm sorry. Is that big enough? Can you see this? Can you see this?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay, so let's start here. Let's start here, which is the place that, if you think about it, all Abrahamic religions have a foot on this hill in this place. And so what was the original intention? Well, according to Psalms, according to King David, he wrote a psalm, we are told, Psalm 30, and which was supposed to be used for the dedication of the temple. And in it, he talks about creating a place for turning mourning into dancing. So, when you think of that, you get two snapshots. First is one contracted and being miserable, and the other is, rocking out. Well, that's not what it was, because in the Bible, one of my favorite things to say about is that as Jews, we learn to be Jewish in English, and it was a bit, it really cripples our understanding of what it means. In the Bible, there are 11 different words for dance. And the one that David is said to have used is mahol. Mahol is a circle dance, often done by women, a ritual dance. It was a dance done when they got by Miriam and the women as they danced on the other side of the sea. It was the dance done in the temple. There was a circle dance of healing. So what he was saying is that you're turning my mourning into a ritual, a healing ritual done in community when people work together and dance and move together to bring healing. So if that is the intention that is at the bedrock of all of these Abrahamic religions, I just, I'm not wearing any jewelry this morning, but I have a sort of a charm necklace where I have little significant things on it. And one of the things is this coin. It's actually from the time of the British Mandate. It's a round coin with a hole in it. And there's an expression in Hebrew that hasn't been so cheap since the grush had a hole in it. but I wear it because I keep wanting to. I want to go back and rewind time so that we could start over and do it right. To go back to this place and remember what Solomon said, or he's quoted as saying, from the very beginning, Solomon built the temple only on this condition. If anyone is in distress, let him come here and pray. That was the intention. That was the intention that is the bedrock of Western religion. Okay, so here's the story. When the temple stood, there was a special path, and it was called the Mourners Path. And the people who walked the Mourners Path entered through this gate, and they walked to the left. And so it says in Smachot, who are those who circle to the left? The mourner, someone who has somebody sick at home, someone who has lost a significant object, and someone who has been excommunicated. So let's think today, who would that be? A mourner, someone dealing with illness, someone whose financial status has changed, and someone whose role in the community has changed. So who would be walking the Mourner's Path today? Just about everybody. Do you know anybody who doesn't fit in one of those categories? I mean, just about everybody does. So these people would be walking to the left, but who would be walking to the right? So the people who would be walking to the right are said, Hamakom Yenachem, may the one who dwells in this place comfort you. And as you know, the word Hamakom is a name for God. Brilliant, brilliant. We have so many names for God, but this one is, without epithet, without a whole lot of description. It allows the mourner to find the comfort that they need and to define it for themselves in the embrace of the community. It's not intrusive. It's not trying to tell the mourner how to behave. It's not trying to say, well, when I went through this, as I like to say, stooping somebody with your wisdom, not the wonderful listening techniques that I'm sure you all have, the listening practices that you all have learned and learned and learned and practice and practice and practice. It's about being present with a blessing. So, but who were they? This is, okay, so here's where we get into my midrash, because I often used to get this when I was in rabbinical school. I would come up with a theory and they would, an interpretation, which I was sure, was grounded in the past. And they would say, well, that's a wonderful midrash. But anyway, here's my midrash, is that these people, so when people came to the temple, what did they bring with them?
Well, all kinds of offerings.
Yes, and the Hebrew word for that is, anybody know, for sacrifice, is korban.
Korban, yeah, korban.
And so usually when they talk about people coming to the temple, they talk about the korbanot that they bring with them, according to whatever it is that was going on with them. But these people coming in here through this southern gate, they didn't bring anything except what was bakir bi, what was inside of them. And that word has the same root as the word korban. So my belief is that what they were offering was their broken hearts, the things deep inside of them that was what they had to offer, was their pain. And so they went through whatever mysterious ritual they needed to go through, and suddenly they were circling to the right, and they became the healers. They became the ones who said Hamakom Yenachem. So, I suspect that you all read the book, The Wounded Healer, in your training or are familiar with it. And, I think that that's what was going on there, is that people brought as their initiation their broken hearts. And in the process of bringing their hearts to the temple, they were initiated into becoming the healers themselves. And I suspect, I mean, if we took the time, that none of you, I always say that, I was a premature elder. I was initiated. Well, I was initiated. Well, I mean, the truth is, my natural father died when I was just a few months old. So I sort of had this call to grief early in life. And then when I was 23, my mother and my sister died. So, I really didn't have much choice about what I was going to do. It was pretty clear what my call was. I guess you could say I was lucky in a kind of way. But my real call came when I was in third grade. And my grandfather, who was this pious Jew who roamed the South with a pushka. I mean, he had a business and he had 7 kids and he did all that. But he went through the South with a pushka for the JNF, the Jewish National Fund. And we won't get into the politics of it that we're aware of now. We'll just think of what they were trying to do. And he never forgot Jerusalem. So, and that was really one of his motivating actions in life. And so there he was. I was in third grade, and he had had a stroke, and he was lying in his bed, and he couldn't speak, and he couldn't move his hands, and he was paralyzed on his right side. And so I was given the wonderful the big privilege of feeding him, which at that time required, the tubes were glass, and so I held his feeding tube above him and watched it drip into his veins. And then when I was finished, I went and I was sort of hanging out in his study, and I saw a plaque on the wall, and it said, "If I forget thee, O Jerusalem, may my right hand fail and my tongue cleave to the top of my mouth."
Oh.
Well, I knew my grandfather had never forgotten Jerusalem. So I think that was one of the most important moments in my life. And I think that that it really is that's why I say I was prematurely eldered, because I think that I was in third grade, and the Deuteronomical formula kind of collapsed for me at that moment. I knew that good wasn't rewarded and bad wasn't punished. And it took me a long time. It took me a long time to even think about God again. And if we have time, I'll tell you about that, because it leads to my having met Reb Zalman in, I think, around 1974. So anyway, let me get back to my notes. So I wanted to just, I'm going to read you this thing that I wrote probably around October the 10th. And it's tied, I mean, it's very rough. It's not a great poem or anything, but I think it really it captures what I think many of the Jewish mourning rituals are meant to teach us. It says, "What if we showed the world what it means to mourn? What if we waited a week? What if we took a week to bury the dead, to sit Shiva, to recite the Kaddish 21 times, to listen to the Kaddish at least some of those times, to hear the words of the Kaddish, its instructions for filling the world with God's presence, its plea to God and to the God part of ourselves to bring down shalom, peace? What if we sat," here, we don't need to look at the temple while I'm doing this. What if we sat in the prescribed near silence of the house of Shiva to hear the prayer for Hamakom Yenechem, a place of comfort, and stories of the deceased, who they were in life, reminding us to dedicate ourselves to being the people we ought to be? What if we stood to say Kaddish or Amen to Kaddish in Hamakom, a name of God, the place provided by words of liturgy, to align with the wisdom and the values evolved in response to the tragedies of the millennia and formed into words of prayer, each word a letter, each letter a place of comfort, a place to stand and to sit, where our tears and angers, where our tears and anger and more tears could pierce the numbness and cool our reptilian brains. Might we respond differently? Might we see ourselves and others differently? Fully felt grief takes us from mochin de katnut to mochin de gadlut, small mind to great mind, ego, from the ego to the collective universal, from why me to what does it mean to be human. We are in this together. Grief should teach compassion. It should be the path toward peace, to finding a way to live together. The Kaddish tells us that. Unprocessed grief sends anger to ricochet through the generations, and here we are, as we have been for millennia. Vengeance for vengeance, tooth for tooth, eye for eye. And once more, Jews will be blamed when we continue the human response and the deadly back and forth continues. Doesn't being Jewish teach us that we are more than human? We are partners in creation, God's feet on earth. That's the thing that we call holy, is that neshama, breath, soul, we share with all living things. The words of the Shema implore us to witness that the thing we call God, Eloheinu, the thing we hold in reverence, is the oneness, the interconnected, unbreakable, shared breath of the planet. Our words of prayer teach us to make something better. They implore us so many times a day to make peace. Yes, I am angry. In my anger, I sit and wait and let my tears move me to be more than my anger, more than my reptilian self, and to pray for the leadership and the will to try another way. What if we showed the world what it means to mourn? So, what can I say? Wait, we can't hear you, Rain.
Oh, I have to unmute her.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where am I? All right, there we go. Unmute. Okay, there you go.
Thank you. On the phone, I can't find it, the button. This is what I've been feeling, and so much. We weren't allowed to mourn. We weren't allowed. We weren't given that option. And I know for myself, I have hardly been able to grieve. You know, once listening to Sean Zevitt's Shachrit that he live streams, I was able to cry. A little bit, a friend Hanukkah lighting at the hostage square in Tel Aviv, where my friend who did come back, but husband was murdered, spoke a little bit. It's just been horrible that we haven't had that, because acting out of vengeance, acting out of anger. And we can see that, you know, obviously it has nothing to do with saving hostages, which is also a huge commandment, a huge commandment. So thank you for your words, because, yeah, it's just been horrible not to have a place to grieve.
You know, I posted this on the Ohala list, like when I wrote it.
Yeah.
I don't think I got one response.
I feel like I read it time, but I was still.
You may have responded. You may have said something. But anyway, that be that as it may. You know, the prayer that we say today, as the mourner's blessing, Hamakom Yenachem Etchem B'toch Sha'ar Avalei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. You all know what it means in Hebrew. I think what it really means is, may you find a holy place of comfort, the comfort that you need in the midst of people who have faced grief and have learned compassion. Now, when a very dear young man died, I it's a long story, but anyway, I had a big poster that his mother had made for me years before when my father had died. And with the mourner's blessing on it, and I brought it back. And a very learned, a much more learned than a teacher that we all probably know and love, said, the Sephardim have a different mourner's blessing. And I think she said, and I think it's better because it's not Avalei Tzion v'Yerushalayim, but it's Bonei Yerushalayim. So may you, may in the midst of those who rebuild Jerusalem. And I, knowing who she was, I deferred to her for about 5 minutes, and I said, "Wait a minute, wait a minute, no." If you immediately go back to building Jerusalem, you're going to do it. You're going to do it with guns. You're going to do it with stones that you throw. You got to sit. You got to sit. So what I want to do next is to take you to the places that we need to sit. Let me just look at my outline. Yes, good. I'm right on track. So let me close this and open this. Wait a minute. So I'll go back there. So what I've done is I've taken, I know that we all know that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is no longer, seen as the be all and end all, but God bless her. She made us talk about grief. And, when I went through all of my losses, there was nobody talking about grief. There were no support groups. I was this 23-year-old girl who just was absolutely crazy. Having lost my mother had committed suicide. My sister had died in a car accident, and I was unleashed on the world, not knowing what to do. What I did was I'll tell you, what I did was I found yoga. And I'll tell you 2 things. I found Be Here Now. I found Ram Dass, and I found yoga. And in Ram Dass, I found, let me not share my screen yet. I'll get back to it. In Ram Dass, I found the phrase unbearable compassion. And I wrote those 2 words next to each other on a piece of paper, and I put them on the wall. I was living, I left New Orleans where I'd been living, where my family was from. And I went back to Berkeley where I'd been living earlier. And I was living in a boarding house. I mean, so when I think of it now, it just breaks my heart, but it's what I could do at the time. And I was living in a boarding house, sleeping on a mattress on the floor. I mean, really, really pretty. I didn't know that mourners are supposed to sit on the floor. I didn't know these things. I didn't know. I mean, I don't know why, but even though I lived in a Jewish community, there was no observance. All the things that I did by my bootstraps, I later discovered that if I had lived in a really traditional Jewish community that had kavanah, I could have been taken care of, and they would have been. And that's why I wrote the book Mourning and Mitzvah, because I really saw the healing intent in all of those rituals. But anyway, so I wrote unbearable compassion on the wall, and then I drew the infinity sign over it. And I would think, okay, I'm going to go into the unbearable as far as I can, and then I'm going to go back. I'm going to have compassion for myself. So I just sort of created this dance, this circle dance of my own, where I went, as far as I could, and then back into the compassion for myself, compassion for my mother who had done this terrible thing, compassion for God or the universe. Well, God wasn't really a factor in my life at that point, but and so now I just really, I mean, that movement of going they talk about dosing your grief. So dosing it, just going as far as you can into it, and then forgiving yourself for not being able to go further. And just, slowly, really, I'm about to get a hip replacement, so I can't do this dance fully at the moment, but but you understand, it was really about, just being kind to yourself and moving, because when you're first struck with grief, you contract. I mean, it is the essence of Mourning Path. It is the essence of, really, really contracting into yourself until it's safe to go into the unbearable. So let me go. So where do we sit? Where do we go? So what I've done is to conceive of these stages of grief, certainly not linear, but as a journey from Mourning Path to Mourning Gadlut, and that they are Sukkot in the wilderness. They are Sukkot in the wilderness of grief. And why Sukkot? Because what is Sukkot? Sukkot is a holiday that embraces one of the most profound spiritual teachings. We live in impermanence. We live in vulnerable situations. It's man simchatenu, be happy. I mean, it is just the ultimate paradox, the same paradox as unbearable compassion. If I was listing the things as I was earlier, the things that I've learned as a Jew that I think really sustain me, the ability to hold two things that seem so different in my heart at the same time. I mean, that's the essence of it, which, makes me crazy. And you may disagree with me politically, but when I see people calling for a ceasefire, but not mentioning the hostages being returned, it infuriates me. I can hold love for two peoples in my heart at the same time, and compassion for the suffering of two people, acknowledgement of their needs at the same time. Anyway, that's a tangent. So what I've done is I've configured the tasks that mourners need to face as different Sukkot in the wilderness of grief, places that we are required to live and to dwell, but they're temporary. It's temporary. So I've not only conceived of them, but I've also designed them and furnished them. This is all doll furniture. Look at that little challah is about the size of the nail on my pinky finger. Anyway, so the first. Oh, also, let me get back to Kubler-Ross a little bit. God bless her. She never meant for her stuff to be used the way that it was used. It was co-opted by people who were afraid of death and didn't want to deal with it, who turned it into this rigid, linear path. I mean, she actually wasn't talking about grief. She was talking about the process of dying. They made it very linear. And these words are just too solid to really describe. I mean, denial, come on. It is that contracted state at the very beginning. And in Hebrew, we have this wonderful word yirah, which is both amazement, but also the shivering nature of awe, which can also have fear. It can also mean fear. They say the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, or that's how, that's one of our bad translations. It's really the beginning of wisdom is the awe of God. Okay, another tangent. One of my favorite retranslations is the word Baruch, translating it through its cognates of Birkayim and Brecha, imagining what it must have been like to go through the desert and to come upon a Brecha and get down on your Birkayim and splash yourself, cleanse yourself, and drink clear, cool water. How the awe and the gratitude you might feel, so that when we're told to say 100 blessings a day, what we're being told is to go through the day with awe and gratitude. Not blessed art thou, but wow, Anyway, back to the first stage of grief, which is not denial. It's this sense of contraction, of fear and trembling, of needing to be surrounded by people who remind you to eat. And and I'm going to go through these Sukkot quickly, and then we'll get back and we'll talk about them a little bit more. So as I don't know if I said, but I have audaciously given them all holy, holy Hebrew names, taken away from the pejoratives that go with such words as denial and depression and anger, and tried to turn them into holy spaces, holy mekamot, for people to dwell. Oh, it's so good to know that you all know Hebrew words. I mean, I know you probably aren't fluent necessarily. I'm certainly nowhere near, but can appreciate these really significant words. All right, so that's, it's this place where mourners sit on stools in a place that's supposed to be quiet, as people say Amen to their Kaddish. Now, the role of, I say this at weddings and I say it at funerals. The role of the witness, as you know, is so important. And when you say Amen to someone, you're saying you're going to the mysterious world where healing happens, and you have to let go of a lot of your assumptions because your world has shifted. And so you have to do this in community where people are holding the tethers that connect you to the earth so that you can go to, when I just did a wedding, it was so wonderful for my cousins and it was in Atlanta. And as they made their circles and they circled each other, the bride didn't circle the groom. I said, okay, with each circle, you're going to a higher and higher place until you get to the seventh heaven. And in that place, the real wedding takes place. But you can't get there safely unless there are people on the ground saying Amen, holding the tethers, so that you can let go of everything and reconfigure yourself in a marriage. And for people who are grieving, the same is true. Healing comes from a mysterious place which we don't understand. And we can do all these things to create the makom, but there's a magic. There's a magic that has to happen in order for healing to happen. And in order for people to feel safe enough to do it, the people in the community need to say, I am here. You are safe. Go to where you need to go. Go to Hamakom Yinechem and do what you need to do, knowing that we are here holding the tethers. And we remind you of that every time we say Amen. So in the beginning, when people say the Kaddish, it's sort of a miracle to read the black letters that begin with Yit Gadal and end with the Oseh Shalom. And it's just about getting from one end of the page to the other while people are saying, I'm here, Amen, Amen. That's the first understanding. That's Kaddish in the world of Asiya. A place to stand where when you don't know where to put one foot or after the other. It's a place to stand in the midst of community. So that's the first sukkah. And again, these are not linear, but we are limited by our conception of language. So the second one, okay, so, she talks about depression, which is, of course, an illness. Grief is not an illness. You, you all know that grief is an appropriate response to what it means to be human. So here in this sukkah, here's this little box of Kleenex, again, the size of my fingernail on my pinky finger. And here's a fountain of tears, and these are rocks. What does anybody have an idea? Oh, well, let me ask you. Well, so instead of calling this depression, I'm calling it kavod. Kavod, as you know, means honor or weight. And what happens is people come into your office and they say, I can't move. I'm just paralyzed. And what it is your body is saying, stop. The whole world is saying, buck up, move on. And you're saying, I can't move. Your body's saying, I have to honor what's happened. I have to deal with the gravitas. But it feels like weight. And, here's these rocks. They represent the rocks in our heart that we feel the weight of the grief. And those rocks are only softened by our tears. But does anybody have any idea what these rocks also represent? Biblical?
God.
Well,
Is
Well, how
our
about
rock, our
the
rock
rocks
would
that
be-
Yaakov slept on?
could be that. That's good. But it's also Moses stood in the cleft of the rock and he said,
Oh, yeah.
let me see your kavod. Let me see you. It's the yearning to have the presence of God back in your life, because for many people, it is the grief that shatters the pediatric understanding of what God is, and so it's that yearning. So Moses stood in the cleft of the rock and he pleaded with God. And what did he see? What did Moses see? He saw God's back, but he saw Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum veChanun, Erech Apayim v'Rav Chesed ve'Emet, Notze Chesed Lalafim, Nose Avon v'Fesha ve'Hata ve'Nakeh. The weight turns into compassion. Compassion for the self, for the person who died, for a universe in which living things die, and the rocks begin to soften. So that's another sukkah. So what's the first feeling that can make it through? Oh, when you're sitting, we'll take a little detour here. I chose pearls because they say that Abraham wore a pearl around his neck, and whenever anybody looked at it, they were healed. But in the midst of mourning, when you're sitting in this chair and you're just feeling so heavy, all of a sudden you see a hummingbird or a baby or a puppy or something, and you are catapulted into the moment. And you forget, and you're laughing, or you're feeling joy, or you're feeling just filled with something good. And for each of those moments, call them moments of grace, and you get a pearl, because inevitably the mourner says, "Oh, I'm not supposed to be feeling that. I'm deep in mourning. Shouldn't be feeling that happy. Shouldn't be feeling good like that." So, but you begin to collect these pearls. So just be mindful of those pearls as we move on to, all right, so what is the first feeling that can make it through the heaviness of in Sukkot Kavod? anger. And this is the turning point. This is the turning point. And this is usually where people get up and go out and start murdering again. They act out their anger. So instead of calling it anger, I have audaciously called it Kodesh. Kodesh. Because I see that anger that mourners feel as life energy, as holy, holy life force, trying so hard to find a way back in when the body is contracted in grief. So here I have, the sacrifices of the temple, the fires of the temple. It was for Judith and Sandra. That's when I moved to Mendocino County and began chopping wood. In order to warm myself, I once had a stationary bike in my office, and I would get people who were just really locked in the weight and sadness of their grief to get on the bike and begin to move, because I think that that's part of mourning into dancing, is just trying to find some energy. But I also have this little fire extinguisher in there because fire can be dangerous. It can warm, it can give life energy, it can help people metabolize and find nourishment, but it can also destroy. And mourners sometimes really act out their anger because they're looking for a place. Mourners have molten lava inside themselves, and it's roiling around in their gut, and it's just looking for a place to be expressed. So I'm daring to call that holy life energy. I'm also saying that we need to be conscious of it. We need, as one of the things I encourage people to do is to wear their black ribbon for a month, because it reminds them that they're in grief, and and they're in an altered state. But it also is a message to the world. Not that everybody knows, but I think if somebody sees a black ribbon on somebody, at least they'll have a moment of pause, wondering what it is. But to know that, this person might act oddly, and they might seem a little bit testy or something like that. Well, that's part of what grief looks like. Okay. So the next Sukkah I'm calling Sukkot Yisrael, the God wrestling, where we try to find partnership with life again, with God again. For me, when I moved up to Mendocino County, I planted a garden. And, I was very theoretical for a long time. When I was still living in the Bay Area, I was making charts, and there were no books about companion planting then. And so I was doing all this research. I wish I had known, you can write books. And so I created this garden, and then I planted it all and put it in the ground, and I thought, well, that's the end of it. Didn't occur to me that anything would come up. And then, hene radishes, radishes sprout in about 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, there was life coming from the ground. And, it was a way of finding partnership. Now, a friend of mine has added an artist's easel and some paints to this sukkah. And, I could also put a challah on the table there. There's so many things in our lives that are partnerships, that we don't do alone. It is the magic of yeast rising. It is the magic of fermentation. It is the magic of creativity, that really shows that, that all of these things are partnerships between the human and the holy. And so that's what this sukkah is about, is trying to find partnership again with, dare I say the word God, with holiness, and trying to find a renewed understanding, because for so many people, it is in the early stages of grief, that their God understanding collapses. And so they're not just mourning the loss of a person or a status in life. They're also they're having a sea change in their theology. And so, all of a sudden, you realize that you've gotten a whole necklace of pearls, that you've had many, many, many moments of grace, that there's a partnership again. You don't quite know how you got that necklace. I can remember being on the road. I think it's Highway 120. Is it 128? I'm not sure. It's from Ukiah to Boone.
Yeah, it's 253 onto 128.
Yeah. And all of a sudden realizing that I'm in a place that, my mother and my sister couldn't even have imagined such a place. And I am here and I'm living a different life, and it's a life about the earth, and it's a life about service. And I'm in a completely new place. And Manora Hamakom Hazeh. I didn't have those words then, but that's what it was. And so here, and it's Yirah again. It's the same word as it was in the beginning, but this is higher awe as opposed to lower awe. It in the first sukkah, it's awe based in pachad or fear, but here it is awe based in praise, gratitude, amazement. And something that I know now, I don't know that I knew it then, or that I want to add, and I'm not quite, is that I don't think that the last stage of grief is anything having to do with acceptance. I don't even know what acceptance means. I don't think we can ever truly accept that we're mortal, or that we, and we certainly, God forbid, we would accept that the people that we've lost are gone, and hopefully they're not. I like to say, sometimes I say, people are always asking me if Judaism believes in life after death. And what I believe is that Judaism doesn't believe in death. And of course, I quote as my proof text the dream scene in Fiddler on the Roof, when Grandma Tzeitel comes from the other world. But I think that our rituals, and I don't think I'll go into them today, maybe at another time, our rituals of Yisker and Yahrzeit are, people always die in the middle of a conversation. And the tools that we have in Judaism really allow us, well, I probably will now say what I said I wasn't going to say, but the tools that we have, let me stop sharing for a while. In Judaism, allow us to find where we were in that conversation and continue the conversation. It starts with, you know what, Sandra just left and we need to take a break. So why don't we take a 5-minute break, and we will start back with continuing the conversation. Okay.
I'm going to pause the recording.
Just started recording again. Oh, let's take a deep breath. So what I was saying is that, I'll wait till everybody's back.
I'm back
And you're vertical.
for a few minutes, for only a few minutes.
Vertical is overrated, Rain.
Thank you. I've come to learn that. Yeah.
Are you having back issues?
No, this is long COVID.
Oh no. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry.
So what we now know is it affects the autonomic system. So if I'm vertical, the blood pools by the feet and then the heart goes into overdrive.
I need to stop now because I hear my dog. Oh no. My dog is in her late stages. So she's either in the backyard or she's in a crate, a bit, not a crate. It's like half the kitchen is taken up by this space and she just goes round and round in circles in both places. But I just heard her moan outside. So I want to just get her and put her in her,
I'll pause the
in
recording.
her.
All right, we're on again.
So as I said, everyone dies in the middle of a conversation. And the work that we have to do is to find where we were in that conversation and continue it. And one of the ways that we do it is the Kaddish. I talked about the Kaddish in the world of Asiya, but there's the Kaddish in the world of of all four worlds. And in the world of Yetzirah, the Kaddish becomes a wireless connection between the worlds. We're told that if not for the people on the other side praying for us, this world wouldn't exist for a moment. And we're also told that when we say Kaddish for someone, we are helping in the purgation of their souls. So what this tells us is that we're still in dynamic communication. We're still in connection. And so the Kaddish becomes the wireless connection for saying all the things that that we didn't get to say, or maybe we couldn't say, because the dust on their souls was such that that they weren't really accessible to us. And they couldn't really hear us or see us. So all that gets to be taken care of on the wings of the Kaddish in the world of Yetzirah. So this is the place where we continue the conversation by saying Kaddish, by observing a yard site. And I mean, I think that these are among the most brilliant of the Jewish mourning rituals are the fact that we acknowledge that grief continues, that the relationship continues, and we have these mekamot, we have these places, these makoms, for focusing on their souls and on our relationship to the souls. And because they come year after year after year, as the cycle unfolds, we get to see where we are in the conversation, how we've changed, how they've changed. You know, the 4 days of Yizkor correspond to 4 tasks of grief, if you think about it. On Yom Kippur, we're talking about unfinished business. We're talking about teshuvah. We're talking about saying the things that need to be said and realigning ourselves. So we're talking about vows. And what are the vows that mourners make? Among the vows that mourners make these, if only I hadn't done this, if only I hadn't done that. And these things that are just really thoughts become thought forms and they become solid. And so we perseverate on all the things that we wish we had done differently, or we wish they had done differently. And they become much more opaque. And so we have the opportunity on Yom Kippur to let them dissolve, to let go of them, and to realign them. We have the opportunity on Yom Kippur, when we say Yizkor, to look at the unfinished business in the relationship. And how have we changed? How have those things changed? You know, my ex-husband once said about my mother about 20 years after she died, you know, she hasn't been so bad lately. And it wasn't that, that she was dead for 20 years. It was that, the story had changed, and the salient things were now her good points. She was really a remarkable woman who suffered greatly and then took her own life. And, what that left in the wake was pretty awful for me. But, as I began to be able to see her with more compassion, the conversation changed. And she wasn't so bad lately. Until my daughter went into puberty, and so a lot of old issues came up. And when I said that, it sounded like shtick. And then I realized that, but you know what? My mother and I have some more work to do. So we're still together in a way. So that was kind of cool. So the next day that we say Yisker is on Shemini Atzeret. Shemini Atzeret, everybody's favorite holiday. Reb Zalman used to say of Shemini Atzeret that Sukkot was this great holiday, and people came, whether they were Hebrews or not, they came to the temple because it was so cool to participate in these water pouring rituals. And then, after 8 days, after 7 days, after the week was over, people began to go home. But God would say to the family, don't go. So the eighth day of gathering, the eighth day of stopping, was a day where that don't go yearning took place. And so I mean, what's the most significant thing that happens on Shemini Atzeret liturgically? No, okay. It's that we, instead of praying for Tal, we pray for Geshem. We pray for rain. So, what is rain? What is yearning? All of those things. The Yisker of Shemini Atzeret gives us the opportunity to just sit. And there's a Talmudic word, Yeush. Joel, I don't know if you know that word, but it's when something's been lost and you finally say, okay, it's gone. And so, I think that the Shemini Atzeret Yisker is a time of saying, okay, this is really, it's like on Tisha B'Av when you recognize that you don't do petitional prayers. You don't do, because there's no way you can change this. The die has been cast. So the sadness of that, the tears of that are all present. And this is another task of grief is allowing the tears to flow, allowing the rain to fall. And the rain doesn't, without the rain, the seeds don't germinate. Without the winter, and according to Reb Arthur, Shemini Atzeret was originally a little bit later in the calendar, and it represented a winter pilgrimage festival that had to be let go of because the roads were so unnavigable. And so, but that it was originally a winter day of pilgrimage. So without the winter, we can't have the spring. And of course, the spring Yisker is the Pesach Yisker on the 8th day of Passover. And so not only does it celebrate the germination of the seeds that were in the ground being nurtured by the tears or by the rain, but it of course is, how am I living in somebody else's house? How am I in bondage to my grief, to somebody else's agenda, the agenda of the person who died? How am I still in bondage? And what am I choosing? Am I choosing freedom or am I choosing bondage? One of the things that we read, I believe we read it on the 8th day, is a story of the slave that doesn't want to go into freedom. And so they take him and they pin him by his ear to the doorpost. So, it's that moment of choice. Do we want to be free? Do we want to move on? And maybe not yet. we could have, these days come every year. The final day of Yisker is the day of is Shavuos. Shavuot. I like to say Shavuos. I just can't help myself. I can just hear my daddy's voice. Shavuos. Or also in there was a Woody Allen movie. No, it wasn't Woody Allen. It was a movie, a King of Comedy, where Sandra Bernhard is holding a gun on. They've kidnapped this comedian, and she's holding a gun on him and saying, "Do I have to hold this gun until Shavuos?" Anyway, what is Shavuot? It is the day that the Torah was given. What was the gift? What was the Torah of the relationship? What was the Torah of the grief? What was the what were the teachings that came as a result of our relationship with this person who's gone? So some years it's all about unfinished business. Some years it's all about what the gifts were. People have a tendency to get locked into only saying good things about the dad or only saying bad things about the dad. And so these 4 days, these 4 windows on grief give us, push us into moving forward in the conversation and viewing the conversation from a different perspective. And so each year, round and round we go. And how has the story changed? How have we changed? These are mekamot. These are hamakom. These are places where we can meet the people that we have lost, and continue the conversation. And by honoring them ritually, we focus the grief. Otherwise, it's diffuse all the time. And of course, we're feeling it in different ways all the time. But by impelling us to focus and to experience it within these different mekamot, it helps us. It helps us to continue the conversation and move it along, and to see where we are as the years go by, and to recognize that we're still in conversation with them. So that's all the Kaddish in the world of Yetzirah. But there's also the Kaddish in the third world, the world of Berea, the world of formation, of abstracts, of intellect. And so, up until now, the Kaddish is, a place to stand. It is a wireless connection between the worlds for emotional expression. But what about the words of the Kaddish? And so this is the place where the theological shift can happen. You may go into your grief, at least the first grief, with this Deuteronomical shattering, where you recognize that good things happen to bad people, and the opposite is also true, and so there's just this falling apart. Now, the fact that we begin with Dayan Ha'emet, which seems like a pretty tall order, at the very beginning of grief, I think it just catapults us into into recognizing that this is going to be a spiritual challenge, as challenging as, I don't know what you're wearing, but, if I were to rip this garment, it would take a lot of energy. And also in the days when these things were formulated, people didn't have a closet full of clothes. So ripping your garment was a pretty both energetic and and significant thing to do. But it puts God in the middle there. And also the fact that during the first stage of grief, on a nut before the funeral, mourners are not supposed to say or study Torah or say amen to people's blessings. And, I think it's creating this stage for the acknowledgement that this is a spiritual crisis. And that grief is a spiritual crisis, and that and that, it gives permission to the mourner to not say, or it challenges the mourner into asking questions. So when the Yit Gadal v'Yit Gadal Shemei Rabash, when it's like, why would I want to do that? The God that I used to believe in has just made someone I love suffer enormously, and now I'm suffering enormously. Why would I want to praise this God? And so, I like to say the Kaddish, it is like a crowbar. Knock, knock, knocking, to use Rabbi Robert Zimmerman, Rabbi Bob Dylan's words, knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. All the existential questions. Why would a good person suffer? What does it mean to be a being that lives on a planet where good things are punished? Blah, blah, blah. All the rage, all the questions, all the existential questions, all of Job's questions, like, what did I do to deserve this? And of course, Job is such a good role model for grief. People somehow remember the patience of Job, but I don't see any patience there. I see anger and I see confrontation. Anyway, so knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door, and then you hit the crowbar hits a sweet spot, and the world's open, and we move into the world of Atzilut. The world where we are in the presence of holiness, and hamakom yenechem. Manorah hamakom hazeh. We've moved into that world where God was present and we knew it not. But it's a different kind of God. I remember this. It was one of the anniversaries, one of the early anniversaries of 9/11, and the wife of a fire captain who died says in her heavy Brooklyn accent, well, you kind of lose your God, but you kind of get a new God. And that's what happens, when you move into the world of Atzilut, and Kaddish in the world of Atzilut begins to make sense. Shlomo Carlebach said the Kaddish is what the dead would teach us if they could come back and tell us what they learned. It's really about filling the world with the great name. And that's really what our role is supposed to be about. Okay. So hamakom hazeh. So let me see. I think let's take kind of an opportunity to just ask, if you want to ask some questions, or if you want to respond to something. And I have some questions that go with each of these Sukkot, which we could break into groups and talk about together. But I'd just like to hear where you are, and what your response is, Judith.
Just wonder how you can be so wonderful.
Thank you. I don't know I have to say, I don't think I've ever been so concise and gotten it all said in such a short period of time. I'm really a little. Thank you, Judith. Sandra.
Yeah, I love this concept of the different kinds of yirah, the low and the high, and probably the in-between. And it's really stimulated a lot of thinking for me about those stages. And I just love the way you transformed Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work, which I've studied extensively years ago as a therapist, into something that really, that fits our beliefs and values and is so concretized in our teachings, and thank you for transforming them into really palatable, receivable, understandable experience.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think it's really important to understand that she didn't mean it as a linear path.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And that you know, we go into each of these Sukkot with a certain amount of trepidation. And then hopefully we make allies of them in such a way that, oh, you know, I need to go and sit in kavod for a little while and cry, or, you know, I need to get this anger out, you know, I need to go chop wood. I don't do a lot of chopping of wood these days, but, but, you know, I mean, they become allies, they become parts of ourselves. And I think that grief is really the initiation into deepening our understanding of what it makes what it means to be human and to be able to honor the different parts of ourselves. Last time we were together, my dear friend Ellen spoke about parts. You know, these are parts. You know, we have the angry part and we have the sad part and we have the part that's struggling, and you know, all of those are parts, and we need to make friends of all of them and have them interact with each other and love each other.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
I never thought that Yisker had a responsibility that I liked how you put a meaning around the different Yiskers. That I never thought of that as vows and yearnings. That was interesting. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, really, it's been there all along. How could people not see it? This is one of the things that we talked about with Roger and Donnie, you know, the other night, was all these things that are just sitting there, you know, and are so that and are so available and seem so obvious, and yet. And that this is a lot of the Hasidic project, I think, you know, was to lift these things up that might not have been seen before, because people were so nervously trying to hold on to the form that they didn't allow themselves to really be creative with the form and to see what it was hiding, you know, or what it was trying to convey, what it was holding, maybe is a better word to put it. Yeah, thank you. More questions, more responses?
I just want to thank you for what you've put forward here, the context that you have, and also to give the examples that you did as you moved through your journey, and the ways in which that helps us not just take in here, but take it in through the heart as to how we can use these tools that you've given us through this lens, in a way that really can support others. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, but I have to say, you know, this is our tradition, you know, I mean, I feel so lucky to know what it means to be a Jew. And I just, you know, my heart breaks for so many people who are just, you know, trying to figure it out now. Would I be willing to share my PowerPoint? Sure.
I
I'll
was
say,
there's
Yes,
another
because I saw you had exercises that go with
yeah.
each of those, and I thought that might be good for reflection to invite, whether that's myself or another. I'll just say that a lot of I've had the opportunity in working in interfaith circumstances, to remind people of the Jewish honoring of loss, that is not just a one-time thing, but is throughout the year and then beyond that, and in ways that help those who don't have that reference point to have a different lens.
Well, Stacy, I just want to lift up what you're saying because, you know, if there were one thing that we have, and there's a million things that we have to offer to a frozen culture, you know, a wounded, you know, it is our mourning rituals. I mean, when I used to, I mean, I haven't done much going out in the world in the last 5 years, but you know, when I would speak to non-Jewish groups about our Jewish mourning rituals and the way that you know, we don't say, oh, she's with God, and then you continue talking like this for the rest of your life, because there's no room for she's with God, you know. Oof, where'd that come from? You know,
Some support as well.
yeah, we really do honor. I mean, just the idea that we don't embalm, you know, that we don't deny death, that we make the noise of the earth on the coffin, you know, that we, you know, force somebody to tear a garment, you know, those things really are powerful. And I feel bad for cultures that don't have. I mean, I think that's a lot of where our world is. You know, it's just mired in this denial that you know, oh, you know, just dump it in the river, just dump it in the river. You know.
On another subject, I'm wishing for you to write another little book right now for Jews that are suffering from all the anti-Semitism, on how to truly value and hold and live in and be joyful of our Judaism.
Well, maybe you should write that book, Judith.
You know, and one of the things that I always think about when I'm dealing with death is you don't skirt the issue of dysfunctional families, and you know how you don't necessarily have to love the person or like the person, and what happens when you don't like the person and you're
Well, this is something that I think we really, I mean, you know, it says that if you say, if you tell lies about somebody in a eulogy, but we don't even use the word eulogy because eulogy means nice words. You know, a hesped is this. It comes from sapad. You know, it's like beating yourself on the heart and telling the truth. If you say something that praises somebody who wasn't good, you have to answer for it in the world to come. And if you say amen to such a hesped, you have to answer in the world to come about that as well. You know, we tell the truth. And you know, we have these rituals, I think, through Yisker and through you know, oh, so I have time. I'll tell you about Reb Zalman. So, you know, as I said, I turned to yoga, and I was living in Berkeley. I don't know if anybody knows Berkeley, but there's a in the student union building or student at Berkeley. There's on the 7th floor, I think it was. There's the Tilden meditation room, and I used to go there for yoga. And one day I was doing, I guess it's the wheel, although I like to think of it as the bridge, even though that's not what it is. But you know, I did it for the first time where I was able to push my hands and my feet down to the earth and lift myself up. And when I came down, I felt this separation inside myself. I felt like curtains were being parted. And I felt that my mother and my sister, I could access them. I felt like I hadn't lost them. And I began to weep in a way that I hadn't wept before. And then out of nowhere came the Shema, you know, something I hadn't said in years. And you know, and I was I was deeply moved. And I thought, oh my God, that's what it means. It's about oneness. It's not about one rather than three, stupid, you know, that's which is what I thought it was about. um, and it was about oneness. And guess who shows up in my life? This man was speaking at Hillel, Berkeley Hillel, and my cousins invited me to go listen to him. It was Zalman Schachter. And so I told him, oh, goodbye, Sandra, great to see you. I said, I had this experience when I was doing yoga. Is this what the Shema means? And he said, yes, yes. So then that was just one time where he showed up. There's so many more, but another one was when I was writing my book, and I thought, I probably need a chapter on Jewish attitudes toward the afterlife. Now, where am I going to learn that? Arrives the Esalen catalog with a course given by Reb Zalman Schachter and Shalomi and Eve Ilson called Jewish Attitudes Toward the Afterlife. So I, head off to Esalen. And my daughter was, I think, about 4 at the time, maybe even younger. So she got a pony for the day, and I got Reb Zalman. and anyway, so and there's, anybody who had a relationship with him has a string of stories like that, where you ask a question of the universe and there he is. I always say the God I don't believe in keeps showing up. So what was I saying that in response to? I don't remember. Just the attitudes toward the afterlife, and the idea that that there are 2 angels. Do you all know this one? There's angels on each side of the universe, and it's like a lacrosse game with the soul of the person who died, and all the dust falls off. So, I love to tell that story to people, even though, do I believe it? I have no idea. But the metaphor tells us that, people have dust and they can't see us clearly. And, after they've gone through this process with the angels, they may be able to hear us and see us better. And so we have an opportunity to close the gap and get rid. They can hear us and see us, and our unfinished business can get resolved. So, we just have these wonderful, wonderful things that really deal with what is true in the wake of loss. That was the thing that Roger and Donnie were decrying Thursday night. They were saying, we have so much to share with the world and we keep it to ourselves. So Stacy, get it out there.
Oh, I think it's more it's really important in the same way that the indigenous peoples of our country are giving over their knowledge in ways to help support the times that we're in right now, with a different relational, non-dominant view of relationship.
Right. And what is the Shema but that? The Shema is all about democracy. It's about, and what is Shalom? Shalom means all voices heard, everything included.
And coming to wholeness.
Coming to wholeness, yes. And Ivri, Hopi doesn't mean this specific tribe, it means the people. And that's what I think Ivri means. Ivri means, I'm trying, but, I'm going this way and I'm going that way. And, I'm going across the boundary, but I'm trying to come back. And we're told that teshuva was invented before was created even before the world was created. So, as a human, as an Ivri, not as a specific tribe, but as what it means to be human, like Hopi means to be human, we're always blowing it, but we have this thing, that this grounding thing, which is teshuva, which always brings us back. Okay. Anything else?
That's what we're invited to do, is to come back.
Come back.
Doesn't say don't ever leave.
It just says come. Great. That's true. It doesn't say
come
don't. It says return. What is it? That's something Steinsaltz said. Well, I mean, but there's a voice that's always emanating from, from Mount Sinai, and it's saying, come back, come back.
You're always able to come back.
Mm. And why does it say Abraham, Abraham, or Moses, Moses? It's because you don't hear it the first time.
Been very nice. Thank you. And
And that was wonderful. Thank you.
Fun. I'd like to think of it as fun.
And this is recorded, and can you share those slides?
Sure. I'll send it to
Perfect.
Chaya.
Send it to me and I'll
Okay.
make sure everybody gets it, and I'll post it to if you don't mind, the RPA and the Ohala list serve. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Oh, reindeer, feel bad. Reindeer, rain deer.
That's okay. My mother called me. My mother called me reindeer. Yeah.
You mean Rain was your given name? I just assumed that was a name you chose.
No, it was my last name. But
Oh,
she would call us for reindeers sometimes.
oh, that's so sweet.
The Rain is your last name?
It was my name and my family of origin. Yeah.
And
Oh.
was Zohav?
No, all my names are chosen. So my given name was Aviva Rain, so spring rain. And she called me that sometimes too. And Zohav was a translation, my first husband's name, Gold. So Zohav. Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
I'm big on picking my own name.
I think
Obviously.
everybody who goes
But
through all
no.
this picks their own name.
Yeah.
And thank you. I'm
Thank
grateful.
you.
And hopefully we'll have another one of these in January. And stay tuned and see everybody at Ohala, either in person or online.
Will there be an online option?
Yes. You can, everything's going to be live streamed, and the plenaries, I'm really pushing for the interactive plenaries to also be on Zoom, so we can be in breakout rooms if we're online.
So maybe I should re-register, because well, I'll be in touch with what's her name?
Lynn.
Lynn. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can't come in person, come online. I'll be live streaming a welcome night, and I will be there as much as I can online also.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's good. That's good. I thought, I didn't know that was an option. I better get back in touch with Lynn.
Yeah.
He's just credited me a part